Hello everyone. Welcome to the future of Matriarchy. I am so excited to be here with all of you. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your evening, your day, whatever time zone you're in to join us here. For those of you who are live, thank you so much. A lot of you reached out and were like, is there a recording? Is there a recording? Yes, there's always a recording that will be coming to you shortly. I would love if people want to drop in the chat where you're calling in from, and if this is like your first time being in any kind of class with me, or if you know me from other classes, let me know. I love to see like how the web is weaving. I love to see where people are calling in from and just the world that we are creating across the interwebs. Let's see, we have Hollywood, Florida. Hi, Jackie. Um, Puerto Rico, hey! First time in class, Miami Beach, not my first time. Love Claire's work, thank you. So appreciate that. All right, awesome, cool. You guys can keep putting that in the chat. I'm gonna share just a little bit about me and then we're gonna get into the meat of stuff. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Claire Wadiasid. I am a student midwife, a spiritual counselor, and a multidisciplinary artist. I'm also the host of the Serpentine Path podcast, and I'm the founder of Sage Femme Womb. And I'm so excited to be here today to talk with you guys about the future of matriarchy and a topic of conversation that I'm absolutely obsessed with, which is the feminine rites of passages and reinitiations that belong to all of our families, that belong to all of our communities, that belong to all of our bloodlines and lineages, but have been like buried under so many centuries worth of violence and oppression and colonization and domination and enslavement, right? Like tapping back into what is alive in our bodies that we've received from all of our elders and how we rebirth that in a way that makes sense for what modern womanhood looks like for us now. So we're going to begin by just closing our eyes. You can get comfortable wherever you are. And we're going to start by picturing a world that's really different from the world that we're currently in right now. And in this world, all young girls are safe and they are protected and they are cared for. It's a world where their innocence is fiercely guarded and their magic is never snuffed out. In this world, young women are well prepared to transition into their bleeding years. They're educated about their bodies. They're unafraid of their hormonal fluctuations. They have joyful and peaceful periods where their fertility and reproductive capacity is honored and supported by their whole community. I want you to envision a world where women feel confident and sure about their sexual decisions. They're taught how to choose good men and to co-create intimate unions with the men who make them feel genuinely seen, respected, protected, provided for, and loved. I want you to imagine a world where the term single mother does not even exist because all mothers who are raising children are doing so with a wide support network of family and friends and community. I want you to feel into a world where women are not pressured into Botox and plastic surgery and all of this anti-aging nonsense. This is a world where every single young woman genuinely looks forward to being a soft-bellied and wrinkled-faced grandmother with wisdom etched into her skin and hard-earned medicine stitched across her palms. I want you to imagine a world where women receive more holistic reproductive care options outside of just birth control and hormonal replacement therapy. A world where our fertility and procreative capacity is centered and nurtured by the culture that we co-weave, because our entire community understands that the health of a people is determined by the health and well-being of the women, the creators of life. I want you to imagine a world where all of the leaders, male and female leaders alike, center the needs of the most vulnerable members of our communities, the children, the women, and the elders. A world where women can do our work of birthing and nurturing the seeds of the next 7 generations with the support of men who fiercely protect us and provide for us because they understand how sacred women truly are. And I want you to feel into what kind of woman you are in a world like this. What does it feel like in your body to exist in a reality that reveres your female body and your feminine spirit? What do you get to spend your time doing? Who are you surrounded by? What are you in service to? And what kind of future matriarch are you birthing yourself into in order to bring that world into being? Really feel her, see her, know her, love her. Because this is the matriarchal future that we are all co-weaving together. This is the prayer that we're going to be holding in our hearts as we move throughout this class. We can all come back, tap back in, and I'd love for you to share in the chat what came up for you, what you envisioned, and the future matriarch that you saw yourself as. And while you put that in the chat, I'm going to share just a little bit more about myself and my past so that you guys get a little bit of familiarity about who I am. So, as I said, my name is Claire Wadiasid, and I am a student midwife, a spiritual counselor, a multidisciplinary artist. I'm the host of the Serpentine Path podcast, and I am the founder of Sage Femme Womb. And I spent the vast majority of my 20s on this crazy, massive, wild quest for healing after suffering from 2 decades of very intense sexual abuse and a lot of very painful gender confusion and very serious, excruciatingly painful reproductive health issues. And so in my big search for healing, to not feel like I was just constantly dying all day, every day, in my body, in my spirit, in my relationships, in my entire world, right? I ended up moving down to Colombia, and I was initiated into a ceremonial way of life. So I was 24 years old when I first made my way down there, and very shortly after, I packed all of my stuff into a storage unit in Bushwick, and I got a one-way ticket down to South America. And very shortly, in those first 2 months of traveling, I met the people who became my spiritual grandparents, so my spiritual elders. My spiritual grandfather's name was Taita Kerowin Keta Alvarado. He was the leader of the Kofan people. He died at 110. And my spiritual grandmother's name was Abuela Maria Magdalena Toikema. She was a matriarch of the Muroi people. They were both traditional doctors and healers and spiritual and political leaders, not only of the peoples that they came from, the pueblos that they came from, but for the entire Amazonian region that they were the guardians and protectors and stewards of. And so I went back and forth from the states to the jungle, states to the jungle, and then I eventually ended up living in the pueblo in a region called Jardines de Sucumbios in Bajo Putumayo, Colombia. And I lived there for a year and a half with my elders, and it was during this time that they both also died. And so I was in the process of accompanying their dying portals and essentially midwifing them through their deaths, which I always say was my initiation into womb to tomb midwifery care. A lot of women get into midwifery through the portal of birth, and my portal was actually through the portal of death. So after my elders passed away, I came back to the United States. I was 28 years old. I had no money. I had to live with my parents. I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. My Saturn return hit really, really hard. And I got to this point where I was like, okay, I spent all of my 20s healing, and now what? Like, what do I do with all of that? What do I do with all of that time, all of that energy, all of that dedication and devotion that I poured into it? Like, what is on the other side? And as I was looking around, I couldn't really find anything that could help me graduate from like that healing era into what I knew was on the other side, which was like mature, initiated adult womanhood, right? There were like no courses, no trainings, no certifications, no healing modalities that could offer that to me. And so I was like, okay, I obviously just have to figure out how to do this myself. And so during this time, I got really, really devoted to figuring out how I was going to integrate everything that I had learned in the jungle from my elders. And I was going back and I was reading through all of my writing and all of my artwork from that time. And I started to slowly piece together the transmission that I received from my time in the territory, right? So from my elders, from the plants, from all of my ceremonial work, from the land and the water of the territory, from my own blood ancestors that I was reconnecting to, and then also from just the immense suffering of 2 decades of sexual abuse and gender confusion and reproductive health issues, right? I took all of that, I alchemized it into this body of work that all of my offerings are now based off of. And that's a transmission that I refer to as the 5 physiologic initiations of womanhood, which is what we're going to be getting into today. Now, the 5 physiologic initiations of womanhood are a biological and spiritual map that is applicable to every single woman worldwide. It does not matter your race, your age, the amount of money that you have in your bank account, the mother tongue that you have inherited, the language that you speak. This is a cross-cultural medicine tradition of womanhood that's based upon the laws of nature and the laws of the female body. So to be super clear, I did not invent these initiations, right? I learned how to remember them. And so I really want to begin this by clarifying that the medicine of womanhood belongs to every single one of us. Every woman on earth has access to this tradition, to this lineage, to this cosmology, to this way of understanding the female body and the feminine spirit. We have forgotten this blueprint due to, as I said, centuries and centuries and centuries worth of so much heinous and horrendous violence that has been enacted upon us as women. And in today's class, I'm going to reinitiate you into it so that you start remembering it. So I'm gonna share my screen, get my little presentation going for y'all, and we'll get into it. Let's see. Okay. Can you all see that? Yes, okay, amazing. All right. Let me pull up my notes on my phone. I have so many notes that I wrote for you guys. I'm so excited, but there's a lot to to cover. Okay, amazing. The future of matriarchy. Let's fucking go. We're going to be talking all about feminine rites of passage and initiations. So, the first thing that I start off with every single one of my classes to help us kind of start to understand what we're even talking about when we get into the world of what is the feminine, right? Very first thing. Oh, actually, pause, go back. We're going to start with talking about what is matriarchy, right? We're talking about the future of matriarchy, but what even is matriarchy, right? So matriarchy is not patriarchy with women on top, right? Matriarchy is not a domination-based hierarchical pyramid with a woman on top where the control is flowing downwards and the resources are flowing upwards. And it's just this unending cycle of extraction and depletion and scarcity and competition, right? That is not matriarchy. That's not what we're all here for. What is matriarchy then? So matriarchy is an organization of layered responsibilities and caretaking roles that places the needs of the most vulnerable at the center, right? So we have children first. Outside of that, we have women and we have elders and anyone who is going to be more on the yin pole, right? I talk a lot about the yin and the yang. So anybody who's on the yin pole, that's predominantly going to be women and elders, but sometimes there are men who also fall into the yin pole. And then in this outer circle, we're going to have the men, right? Or women who land more on like the yang pole, right? The women and the elders are going to be the nurturers and the nourishers of life. the men outside in this outer circle, the protectors and the providers of life. If it's easier for you to switch men and women with yin and yang, that also works as well. Matriarchy is a living web of reciprocity and relationship and regeneration, right? So in the center, we have the mother-baby dyad, we have family and kin, we have land and water, and we have ancestors and the future generations. And all of these waves and ripples, internally, externally, they're feeding one another, and they're in service to the exaltation of life. Matriarchy is not asking who is in charge here, right? It's asking what is each person responsible for tending. And as I said, it's a system of responsibilities that circulate around what is sustaining life. So nourishment, protection, teaching, healing, birthing, sheltering, feeding, and remembering. Matriarchy is not something that we're sitting around and waiting for or begging for or asking for. It's not something that we're looking to others outside of us to come give us, right? It's something that we have to remember how to practice because it's alive within all of us. When I feel into my deep ancestry, who my ancestors were before their own experiences of violence and colonization and enslavement and being ripped from their own land-based indigenous lifeways, what I can feel into is that the only system that works, that is truly in service to thriving life, is a matriarchal system. This is the blueprint that all of our peoples come from. And so it's not something of we're waiting for it, right? It's we are learning to remember it because it is our birthrights as women on this planet, as the creators and nurturers of life. This is what we are all here to do. That's why you came to this class, right? So now let's get into kind of a deeper understanding, male, female, masculine, feminine. What are we talking about here? Again, I often will interchange it with like yin and yang. If it's easier for you to think about it in the yin and yang terms, do that as well. Go for it. So let's get super clear about biological mammalian roles, like male and female. What does that mean? What are we doing here? And I always like to kind of get super, super nerdy about wolves. I'm obsessed with wolves. They're like my favorite animals ever. So think about this not as like men and women, but think about a mama wolf and a papa wolf and a baby wolf, right? When we're looking at these wolves, what are their biological roles? The female wolf, right? The female mammal is the responsible for the continuation of the species by way of pregnancy, birth, and breastfeeding, right? The male mammal is responsible for survival of the species by way of resource provision and protection. Now, I want to drop a phrase into your consciousness because it's going to come up over and over and over again, which is the term inherent biological value, right? And what inherent biological value means is a mammal who can reproduce and continue the species forward. That mammal has biological value in nature. So this female wolf has biological value. This male wolf does not. It is the same for men and women. And your inherent biological value is not determined by whether or not you have kids or not. That does not increase or decrease your inherent biological value. Simply being born as a female mammal makes you inherently biological value. It makes it so that you inherently deserve and have a right to protection and resource provision simply because you are the mammal who will continue the species forward. Now let's talk about another term that's super important. It's called territory, right? We're looking at mammalian territory. Again, thinking about wolves here. For the female mammal, her territory is going to be internal. It's going to be estrogen dominant. So we're looking at the left side of the brain, and it's how she perceives the world. So what female territory is that it's her body, it's her emotions, it's her relationships, it's her sexuality, her reproduction, and it's eventually her children. Now, on the flip side, male territory, again, think about a male wolf. A male wolf's territory is external and it's testosterone dominant. So he's seeing the world from the right side of his brain. What this would look like for a man is that his territory is going to be his job, his home, his finances, his car, his land, his animals, his woman, and his children. It's everything he's responsible for tending to, everything that belongs to him. And it's also how he proves his value. He doesn't have inherent biological value. He cannot reproduce and continue the species forward. He proves his value by taking care of his external territory. Now, an interesting part of territory, which is super, super important when we get into the later stages of female development, right, which is going to be menopause. Territory, female territory specifically, shifts with our different hormonal shifts throughout our reproductive continuum. So female territory is only internal when a woman is ovulating. This means that when she's on birth control, when she's pregnant, when she's breastfeeding and hasn't gotten her cycle back, and when she moves into menopause, there's an external territorial shift. And so women naturally become externally territorially focused and motivated around age 50, right? That's like the average age of menopause. Now, the reason that I gave you all of that weird, like biological mammalian territorial lingo is because male and female territories, internal for women, external for men, are mirroring men's and women's initiations, which is what we're talking about in this whole class today, right? And when we think about what are men's initiations and what are women's initiations and what are the male rites of passages and what are the female rites of passage, I want you to remember this phrase that says, a man is made and a woman is born. I'll repeat that one more time. A man is made and a woman is born. So what does that mean? Let's look at men's initiations first. Men's initiations require some form of external testing in order to prove that a new developmental stage of manhood has been achieved. So some of the examples that we can see in many different cultures worldwide are going to be things like the Sundance or the Vision Quest or all of these different crazy warrior tests that guys have to do, right? Where they have to like go kill a lion and like pull his tooth out, or cut off the head of a poisonous snake, or wrestle a crocodile, or like cover your body in fire ants, right? This is how men prove that they are strong enough, that they are disciplined enough, that they are developed enough to actually be seen as a man by their people, right? His territory is external, his initiations are external. Now, when we look at women's initiations, they're totally different, right? Women's initiations are all centered around the internal rebirth that is naturally unfolding by way of the hormonal transformations that are occurring throughout the entirety of the female reproductive continuum, right? So unlike a man's initiation into manhood, we as women are not designed to have to prove to anyone that we are women because our bodies have already communicated exactly what life stage we're in and what medicine we're currently walking with, right? So when we think about what are women's initiations, they are these 5 physiologic initiations that my work is based upon, right? They are birth, blood, sex, death, and rebirth. Okay. Let's get into our first initiation. So, the initiation of birth. Now, a woman's entire relationship to not only her mother, but the mother in general, right? Like the great cosmic mother, Mother Earth, whatever you want to call it, and also to life as a whole, is first shaped in her early experiences of conception, pregnancy, birth and postpartum. So when we're talking about the initiation of birth, we're not just talking about the moment when baby comes out of the mother's body, right? What we're talking about is how was she conceived? What was going on throughout the entire pregnancy that her mother was carrying her in? What did happen during her birth, and also what happened in her postpartum, not just the immediate postpartum, but like the whole 9 months after birth. Now, one thing that we also want to touch into is that there is this concept of the three-generation footprint that some of you might be aware of, right? And what it is that a little baby girl, when she is inside of her mother's womb, her ovaries are finished developing by, I believe it's like the 20th week of gestation. So by like the 5th month of pregnancy, a little baby girl has all of the ovary or all of the eggs in her ovaries that she will carry for the rest of her life, which means the egg that created you was alive inside of your grandmother's body. So our initiation of birth doesn't even actually start with us. It starts all the way with our mother's birth with our grandmother, right? And so we look at this, we see that the ovaries are the carriers of motherline medicine. And we see that the impact of the births of our mother line are impacting how we then are experiencing our relationship with our mother and what is being passed down to us. What we're looking at also during the pregnancy is what are the amniotic waters that we were swimming in with our mother, right? Because as we know, water transmits memory. It's the first elemental guardian, the first elemental teacher that we come into being with, right? Because we are just swimming in the amniotic waters of our mother's wombs during that time. And so what are the waters that we are gestating in? What are they teaching us? What frequency are we receiving from that? All of that is going to impact our relationship with our mother. Our birth with our mother, of course, is a huge, huge impact. Anybody who had like a really traumatic birth, either giving birth or being born, knows that it has a huge impact because birth is the very first act of true teamwork that a little baby girl gets to experience with her mother, right? Now, we talked about all of the stuff kind of leading up to birth. Now we're going to look at what comes after. So everything before the birth is called intragestation. It's those 9 months where she's being created. The 9 months after birth is going to be considered exogestation, right? And during exogestation, a baby is pretty much completely helpless, right? And their entire body, their entire nervous system is interconnected with their mother. Their mother's body is that baby's very first ecosystem that they have ever known. And it's regulating all of the functions of the autonomic nervous system. So the mother's body is quite literally regulating the baby's breathing, their heart rate, their temperature, their digestion, their sleep and wake cycles. And it's all determined by a baby's proximity to its mother. Something really, really important to understand about the postpartum time, which is still part of this initiation of birth, is that the mother and the baby need to be able to hear, see, taste, touch, and feel and smell one another in order to co-regulate their nervous system. So it's not just baby needs mom in order to be well. Mom also needs baby in order to be well. And so when the mother-baby dyad is severed, it damages not just the baby's connection with mother, but the mother's connection with baby and the mother's understanding of how to mother intuitively, how to actually come online, right? So our current culture, obviously, is completely set up to sever the mother-baby dyad, right? At every single step of our gestational continuum, right? It's like literally designed to profit off of the separation between mothers and babies. And this looks like hypermedicalization of pregnancy. It looks like forced inductions. It looks like the cascade of interventions. It looks like unnecessary C-sections, immediate cutting of the cord, active third stage management of the placenta, pushing formula feeding, pressuring mothers to get back to work just a couple months postpartum or weeks or even days postpartum, right? Like it is not honoring that first initiation of life. Now, when all of that happens, right, that very first moment of true teamwork and connection between mother and baby, when it's severed, a little baby girl immediately develops the first wound of womanhood, which is The mother wound, which pretty much every single one of us have in some way or another, right? And what the mother wound looks like is going to be a strained and avoidant relationship with her own mother. It's going to look like having a really hard time nurturing and mothering herself, first and foremost, and then also her own children, if she has children. It looks like chronic nervous system dysregulation. This is specifically very prominent in women who are actually sleep trained as babies, right? Because your entire nervous system has been taught to completely shut down. When you're sleep training a baby, like the baby will literally like cry itself to the point where it passes out and it like feigns death, right? And so many of us were sleep trained and we wonder why we have such dysregulated nervous systems as adults. It's because our nervous system was being programmed to just be in like constant fight, flight, freeze, or like complete shutdown while passing out due to lack of oxygen when we were sleep trained. And then the last big one that I see with women is blocks when we're trying to birth and mother our dreams and our visions. So this can look like our creative projects, this can look like our businesses, this can look like our relationships, our family, our home, our garden, right? It's always going to show up at like the exact same time because it's reflecting the birth imprinting that we received during that first initiation that was not cared for and tended to and honored and revered in the way that it deserved to be. So, who has a mother wound? Drop it in the chat if you're like, yo, mother wounds are crazy. Because I definitely have one and it's taken me a long time to heal it. So, if you got a mother wound, you are certainly not alone in this. Okay. Next initiation that we go through as women is going to be our blood. So a young girl's very first bleed is marking her transition into womanhood, right? It's taking her from girl to woman, which is going to be accompanied by new responsibilities and also a new community role that you are initiated into. So when we're looking at like what does that transition from little girl into young woman or into like her maiden phase, what does that look like? And what that looks like is that this is the moment when she's being taught this is what it means to be a woman. Okay, well, what the fuck does it mean to be a woman? Like, who knows, right? What it means to be a woman, first and foremost, is that you're being taught that you are now capable of continuing human life forward, that comes with like a huge responsibility. So the first thing that you would be taught about coming into womanhood is tending to your body, tending to your fertility, tending to your internal territory, right? This internal territory that we first spoke about at the beginning of class. And what that looks like is being taught how to eat for your health, being taught how to work with herbs, being taught all of these different body work modalities and techniques to tend to our womb, to tend to our breasts, to tend to our vagina, to tend to our reproductive organs so that we can feel healthy and vital, so that we can do our work of stewarding the next generations, either by having our own children or by supporting all of the women in our lives who have children of their own, right? Also, so that we just feel good in our bodies, so that our health is like online, so that we're not feeling shitty all the time, right? That's the whole purpose of tending to our fertility. It's not just for babies, but it's our entire life force energy, right? Our blood, our menstrual cycle is our fifth vital sign. It tells us exactly what's going on in our bodies. And so we learn how to tend to that when we're learning what does it mean to be a woman. Now, what we're also learning of what it means to be a woman is that we're learning that we actually have very specific community roles and responsibilities. We're learning that our words hold serious weight, right? And so we're being taught how to use our words wisely. We're being taught to think before we speak, and we're being taught to not gossip and talk shit and stir the pot and like create mountains out of molehills, because the feminine word is such powerful medicine, right? We're being taught conflict resolution. We're being taught how to move through difficult moments and how to not use our words as weapons. This is also a time when a woman's magic really starts coming online, and her gifts are meant to be recognized and reflected by her community, right? So usually during this time, it would be when she would be moving into like apprenticeship and mentorship, when she would have teachers who would bring her in and say, we see you, we recognize you, we know that you have like these beautiful gifts in medicine that you need to cultivate. And so we're going to offer you that level of care and attention and fine tuning what it is that you're going to pour out with your path of service moving forward. So when we think about this juncture shifting from girlhood into womanhood, and if we look at a culture that wants to teach women how to hate ourselves, this is the exact moment when you would start to do it, right? This is the moment when you would teach a young woman to hate her changing body, to be disgusted by her blood, and to be ashamed of her spiritual gifts. This is the initiation where the seeds start to like really, really get planted of like, stay a little girl because you're more easily controllable, you're more easily dominated, you're more easily taken advantage of. Like, don't actually come into your full power as a bleeding woman. And so we have the second wound of womanhood, right? Which is going to be developed when our blood initiations are not honored. And that is going to be our maiden wound, right? And some of the symptoms of a maiden wound are going to be painful periods, reproductive health issues, fertility struggles, hormonal imbalances, anything having to do with our cycle. It's going to look like disordered eating patterns and extreme physical exhaustion, right? Because we're not being taught how to move in the flow of our cycle. This is when we would also be constantly competing with and comparing ourselves to other women, right? Because we weren't given a clear community role, we weren't recognized for our gifts. And so we're constantly like, who do I need to be better than instead of who do I get to build alongside of? How do I bring my gifts? How does she bring her gifts? And how do we co-create together? And then the last one, which I think a lot of women struggle with, is an inability to commit to a really clear path of service that's utilizing your unique talents. This is why you'll see women who are like grown adults who are like, I don't really know what I want to do with my life, right? And it's not those phases of like, I'm in a transition period, but it's those women who are like, I just don't know what my path of service is supposed to be. All of this comes back to that moment when she started her bleed and she didn't receive proper orientation and guidance and mentorship and care of like, this is how you can best serve, this is how you can best utilize your talents, your gifts, your medicine. So who has a maiden wound? Oftentimes this is confused with a sister wound. People think that the sister wound is like the actual wound. The sister wound is like it's one of the symptoms of a maiden wound, right? It's like there's a deeper layer that has nothing to do with the women around you and has everything to do with like what's going on with your blood. Okay, moving on. Next physiologic initiation is going to be our initiation into sex and sexuality. So, a woman's relationship to the masculine, to men in her life, is determined by the sexual education that she received and also by the very first sexual experience that she had. So, as I've shared with you guys, I went through a very, very high degree of sexual abuse. I would say that my initiation probably into sex and my relationship with the masculine is probably my biggest wound that I have had to heal in my entire life. So I hold just like so much deep reverence for women who walk with this pain in particular, because the reality is that our initiation into sex actually does not begin with the physical act of sex itself. What we think of as sexual education really actually starts first and foremost by how we see our mother being treated by men, predominantly by our father, but by all of the men in her life. That's the first blueprint that we receive in our initiation into sex. The reason for that is because remember, a young baby girl is the same as her mother because our nervous systems are being regulated by one another. And so we are not yet individuated from our mothers up until the time that we're kind of like moving into our bleed, age 13 to 25 is when we move through individuation. So up until that point, how men treat our mother is how men treat us. That's how we translate that in our psyches. And so we're essentially seeing what it feels like to be our mother because it's being reflected in our nervous system. And then we're also understanding that we belong to our father, right? We're the same as our mother. We belong to our father because he is responsible for our protection and our provision. And so, what does it feel like to belong to our father? That's the first foundation of our sexual education. What does male belonging, masculine belonging, feel like in my body, both by what I'm witnessing with my mother's relationship with men and then my relationship with older men? So, little girls and young women are actually being taught about sexual sovereignty when they are surrounded by boys and men who protect them and who provide for them without expecting sex in return. Remember, we talked about inherent biological value. You, as a woman, as a female mammal, have the right to be protected and provided for simply because you were born as a woman. You don't have to trade shit for that, right? You do not need to be trading your safety for sex. That is where distortions with sexuality start to be created, and then it's going to be amplified when women then do actually start engaging in the act of sex. So the initiation into sex is also truly an initiation into belonging, choosing who to belong to, which requires a really solid internal masculine, an inner yang framework, an inner protector, right? And what that first looks like for a little girl is it feels good to belong to my father. It feels good to belong to him. Then, as she moves through more of her individuation from like 13 to 25, she's understanding, oh, now it gets to feel good to belong to myself. What does self belonging feel like? And can it feel as good as it did as when I belonged to my father? And then after that, by the time that she's like really ready to take on partnership, she gets to decide to choose to belong herself to a partner who it feels just as good to belong to him as it felt to belong to herself. And it feels just as good as it felt to belong to her father. That's what our initiation into sex is meant to be, right? Clear, chosen belonging from a place of like autonomy and sovereignty. And so, again, when a little girl or a young woman is taught that she has to trade sex for safety and provision, this is when we develop the third wound of womanhood, which is going to be the masculine wound, super painful one. And the symptoms of this are going to look like just having constant fear of men, building relationships with men that are entirely predicated on sex and seduction. This was a big one for me, guys. Really having a hard time to relate to men within the context of brother and friend or father or uncle or grandfather, right? Not as someone who you need to be like sexually available to, but as someone who just like loves you and cares for you for no other reason than loving you and caring for you. What? It took me so long to reprogram this, right? With my wonderful father, who I love dearly, with my uncles, with my guy friends. And what really helped me shift this was, being spiritually adopted by my spiritual grandfather. I felt so safe with that man, like so safe. It completely reprogrammed my whole experience around sexuality, and my healing around sex had nothing to do with healing. It had to do with like how I was relating to men, right? Another symptom that we'll see often with the masculine wound is going to be a really hard time activating her own inner masculine protector to keep her safe, right? And so that's not just safe in relationship to men, but like her own inner masculine protector that's like, that doesn't work for me. No, 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 I'm not tolerating that. No, thank you, right? Like shifting into people pleasing and fawning and not having that inner masculine that's like, I have my own back and I don't fuck with this and you can't mess with me, right? When we have a masculine wound, it's really, really hard to show up in that way. And not like in an aggressive way, but just in a way of just like, I'm in my sovereignty. I know I'm good. You can't mess with me. Like, go off on your own way. And then the last one that we see of the masculine wound is going to be hypermasculinization and a renunciation of her femininity as a coping mechanism. This was huge for me, you guys. I very strongly identified as non-binary and like gender fluid and trans for 7 whole years, okay? I was like super aggressively renouncing my femininity because I was scared of being raped again, right? That was like my coping strategy. And also with that, because I was like hyper masculinized, I was also competing against men for resources instead of allowing myself to receive resources from them. So, who here has some fun masculine wounds that they're working through? I see people in the chat being like, same, yes, feel that, yup. It's super hard, but we're gonna figure it out, guys. If I can heal my masculine wound, anyone can heal their masculine wound, okay? The shit that I went through and the shit that I healed, anyone can do it, I swear. All right, moving on to our next initiation, which is the initiation of death. Now, actually, sorry, give me a sec. I need some water. I always get so excited when I teach guys, and I just like go, 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 and then my body's like, you need to hydrate, bitch. Let me hydrate. If people want to hydrate, do your thing. Okay, let's get into it with the initiation of death. So, as the creators of life, right? As beings on this earth that can conceive, gestate, birth, and nurture life, women also hold the medicine of death within our own wombs during miscarriages, during abortions, stillbirths, in our postpartum, and then throughout perimenopause and menopause, right? All of this is death medicine, specifically reproductive death medicine. Life begins in the womb of a woman, and life ends in the womb of a woman. Yes? So when we're thinking about this initiation of death, I feel like it's maybe the most hidden one, the most challenging one to really wrap our heads around. But what I want you to kind of take into your consciousness is that men can only experience death externally through acts of violence or through acts of like an accident, like a really heinous, horrendous accident that leads to death, right? Men only have this experience of things dying from their external perspective, their external territory. Remember, we talked about territory. Women, on the other hand, experience death internally every single month with our bleed. Every single pregnancy ends in both a birth and a death of sorts, right? Especially with pregnancy loss, with miscarriage, with abortion, with stillbirth. It ends in her postpartum, right? Because it's the death of who she has been up until that moment, whether it's her first baby or her 10th baby. And then it ends when she moves into menopause. So our bodies are the keepers of both the medicine of life and the medicine of death, right? And so, what would it mean for women to live in a culture that honored death, right? This would look like honoring all of the cycles of nature, the sun, the moon, the seasons. This would look like honoring the needs of the body, our hunger, our digestion, our rest, our sleep, our exhaustion. This would look like honoring the transition of different life stages, right? So moving from your girlhood into your maidenhood into your motherhood into your elder matriarchhood. This would look like honoring all of the big endings of our lives, not just the exciting new beginnings, but the like really hard, challenging endings that our bodies go through, the death that our bodies go through. Now, the thing is, we don't live in a death honoring culture. We live in a death over culture, which means a culture that's predicated upon capitalism and labor exploitation and land extraction and poisoned waterways and GMOs and pesticides. And we are actively disconnected from the laws of nature that says everything that lives must die so that it can be reborn, because nature is perfect the way it is. Life is predicated upon death, is predicated upon life, is predicated upon death, right? Now, I want to be super clear when I say like this death initiation is one of the ones that is like the most hard to wrap our heads around, but not honoring death is also predominantly what makes us really, really sick as women, right? Women are these cyclical beings that we cycle with the moon, very different from men who are cycling with the sun, whose hormones are resetting every 24 hours, right? We have this experience of more long time, right? And so death, when it is not revered in our bodies, makes us really fucking sick. This is why in traditional Chinese medicine, they say that the female body is 10 times harder to heal, to bring back into alignment, to bring back into coherence, because of the intensity of what it is to be a carrier of life and a carrier of death inside of our own wombs, right? And so when we're not living in a culture that honors female death, feminine death medicine, it forces us to constantly be in that flow of like output and producing and pouring out without time to go inwards and rest and recover and rejuvenate. So when women are not taught how to honor death, we develop the fourth wound of medicine, which is going to be our mortality wound. So what is the mortality wound? What are the symptoms? The big one that I often see is remaining in energetic limbo after pregnancy loss. So after miscarriage and abortion, I work with a lot of women, both virtually and in person, who have moved through miscarriage and abortion. And the fact that we live in a culture that does not honor miscarriage and abortion as a birth and as a postpartum period is absolutely criminal to me. And it is so challenging for women to move through that initiation and to not have that death witnessed and cared for and tended to and honored for the weight that it holds, right? Another big thing that we see, this is specifically in the postpartum, is the inability for a woman's intuitive mothering to come online, right? After her postpartum. This is where you see a lot of women who are mothers, full-blown mothers, they had a full-ass baby, right? But they're still stuck in this very like immature maiden part of themselves because their transition into motherhood, the death of their maidenhood, the death of who they are before their baby, is not being honored, witnessed, is not being celebrated and tended to as the rite of passage that it is, right? And so we're like, why is she running around acting like a maiden when she has a whole ass baby at home? It's like, well, does anybody actually recognize her as a mother? Does anybody really truly honor the death of who she has been? Does anybody see her any differently? Has there been any ceremony? No. Okay, then yeah, your psyche too would be quite confused if no one is accurately reflecting back to you what a massive transition that you have gone through, a massive death that you have gone through. Another big symptom that we see is going to be women who just push past her physical limitations while ignoring the call to rest, right? This looks like women who do not rest on their period, who do not rest during postpartum, and who during perimenopause and menopause like continue to try to push themselves in the way that they were able to do when they were younger. Basically, during those 3 windows of time, our bleed, our postpartum, and moving into like the perimenopause, menopausal years, that is when everything that we have pushed past throughout the continuum of our reproductive life, it's when it shows up the most painfully because the body is screaming like, let this past version of me die. Like, if you don't, I'm going to get sick. This is when women get sick the most, right? Around the time of their bleed, in their postpartum, or in the perimenopause and menopausal years. And then the last big symptom that we see with the mortality wound is going to be utilizing like anti-aging mechanisms to try to stay frozen in your youth. When we are taught that there is a problem with our reproductive years eventually coming to a close, when we're taught that it's good to stay young and youthful and naive and easily manipulatable, right? We're going to be like, I need to stay looking like a 20-year-old instead of being like, I'm actually 30 years old and I want to look like a 30-year-old. I'm 40 years old. I want to look 40. I'm 50. I'm 60. Like I want my body and my face and my skin and my heart to reflect the deaths that I have been through because that's medicine that I carry, that I walk with, right? So who here has a mortality wound? I definitely still grapple with it at times. I notice it coming up over and over again, especially every time that my bleed comes around. It's like another opportunity for me to be like, wow, what death am I resisting right now? What do I not want to let go of? And I'm sure that that's only going to be magnified when, God willing, I have children, I move into postpartum, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, people in the chat. They got their own mortality wounds. Okay. Last initiation that we have is going to be the initiation of rebirth. And this is probably, no, I love them all, but I'm like, I have a sweet spot for this one, right? Because with the initiation of rebirth, what we see in cultures all around the world, right, is that menopausal women who have stopped bleeding are actually revered as the spiritual leaders and community oracles and political leaders of their peoples, right? So, for example, in the Kofan tradition, which was the lineage that I was adopted into, women don't start serving medicine and start leading ceremonies and start like really stepping into their role as leaders and as healers until after menopause, right? And in their culture, it's because it's her final initiation, right? The end of her bleed. And that's when spiritually she becomes the most powerful. And I had the opportunity when my spiritual grandmother, Abuela Maria, died. I had the opportunity to see the next matriarch in that pueblo. Her name is Abuela Zoila. She's a really wonderful grandmother that I also got to learn under. I got to see her transition coming into her role now as the village matriarch, right? And it was strong and it was powerful to see like a rising matriarch in her community. We really don't see that these days because we have forgotten how to care for and love and tend to and respect and revere our elders, right? We just like have not been taught that especially grandmothers are like the central figures of community orientation, that is their biological role, right? To continue their people's lifeways forward. So in traditional Chinese medicine, I was talking with my acupuncture about this the other day. Menopause in TCM is referred to as the second spring. It's also referred to as the wisdom years, right? And it's because all of the energy that was moving down into our reproductive organs for the act of reproduction, all of that energy, all that life force energy that has been moving down, 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 it moves upwards, right? It moves to our third eye, it moves to our crown, it moves to this place where we get to start visioning and seeing a completely different reality. Our territory shifts because we're not ovulating anymore. And this is when women seriously come into their path of service and their most powerful medicine. So when we move through rebirth, and it's not just in menopause, right? We move through different cycles of rebirth throughout all of our lives, but especially menopause. This is the most powerful stage of womanhood that exists and is the one that is the least understood and the most disrespected, I would say, right? Now, what we're seeing is in the preparation to move into this rebirth during like a lot of death medicine with perimenopause, women are losing our levels of estrogen and our levels of progesterone, which are going to be the two hormones that are like obsessed with keeping the community together, keeping the family together, focus on the gestation, focus on the babies, focus on the kids. As she's losing those hormones throughout her 40s, women just start to give less and less and less of a fuck. And by the time they get through menopause, they give no fucks, which is why perimenopausal women and menopausal women are so dangerous to the overculture that pedestalizes young and naive and immature and uninitiated women, which, let's be super real, that's like super pedophilic, right? To only value that young version of womanhood when the final initiated version of womanhood is like this powerful, right? Like women who get to this point fully online as elders, they're unstoppable, they're unfuckwithable, they're unshakable, right? So when a woman is not offered like this living example of healthy, mature, initiated matriarch, it's going to manifest as the fifth and final wound of womanhood, which is the matriarch wound. And what this will look like is disrespecting authority and devaluing the lived experience of older women, including probably herself, right? I've actually seen a lot of women who have like already come into their matriarch years and they're still like, well, I don't really know. Well, who's going to listen to me? Well, I don't think I should take up space. Bullshit. You made it through your final initiation. You're in your wisdom years, right? Like this is the moment where you really, really respect the value of your medicine. What I would also say about this, the disrespecting authority and devaluing, this is for the younger women, right? The maidens or the mothers who are like, I don't have any elders, I don't have any elders. But it's like, okay, there are tons of older women around you and they have hard-earned lessons. And no, of course, they're not perfect, but they are your elders no matter what. They are older than you. They've been on this planet longer than you. Even if they're absolutely batshit crazy, they have medicine to offer, right? And so a big matriarch wound is saying, I don't have elders, I don't have elders, I don't have elders. Look around. They're everywhere, right? You just have to learn how to see them, how to respect them, how to acknowledge them, how to honor them, and how to really ask them for the medicine that they have to share, which might not be the medicine that you think is what you're supposed to be receiving, right? It's the medicine that they can offer from their own hard-earned wisdom and experience. Another big matriarch wound, as I was saying, this inability to step into your power and your leadership role. And this happens at any age and life stage, not just when you're moving into menopause. But it's this part of you who's like, well, who am I to take up space? Well, who am I to share my voice? Well, who am I to share my medicine with the world? Like, I'm not trained enough. I'm not educated enough. I don't have enough certifications. I don't have, the right credentials, blah, 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 blah. So I'm just going to abdicate my responsibility and my leadership, right? What we see with the matriarch wound, another symptom, is going to be a resistance to shedding any of the past selves and rebirthing into a future elder, right? So a lot of this looks like wanting to stay in past phases. So wanting to stay a little girl when you're a maiden, right? Wanting to stay a maiden when you've become a mother, wanting to stay a mother when you've moved into your elder matriarch years. It's not wanting to let go of that younger version, to let her die so that you can be reborn. And then I would say the biggest, most painful wound with the matriarch wound is going to be feeling disconnected from the responsibility, from the right, the birthright, and the responsibility to orient our bloodlines 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. Okay, that is like what women are here on earth to do, to create a more beautiful world for ideally the entire human family, 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. So who knows that they definitely have a matriarch wound? I feel like you guys came to this class because you're like, I want to figure out what it is to be a matriarch and how to do this in a way that's like loving and beautiful and kind and compassionate. So yeah, awesome. Okay. Okay, so we went through the initiations, we went through the wounds. This is where so much of a lot of like women's healing spaces get things wrong. The reason is because they're focused on the wound, right? They're like, I have to heal my mother wound. I have to heal my wound with the masculine. I have to heal my sister wounds. I have to find my elders because I have no elders. Blah, 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 blah. It's all about like the wound and the pain, right? And so you cycle and you cycle and you cycle and you get obsessed with just focusing on the wound itself, right? Now, what I want to help you guys understand is that the wound is a good thing to be aware of, but it's not actually the thing that you need to put all of your attention into. The wound is going to take care of itself when you go to the origin of the wound, which is the initiation, right? So if you're looking at a mother wound, what you actually have to look at is tending to a reinitiation of your birth. When you're looking at a maiden wound, you want to do a reinitiation around your blood. A masculine wound, you want to do a reinitiation around sex. The mortality wound, you want to do a reinitiation around death. And the matriarch wound, you want to do a reinitiation around birth. Now, the reason I'm using the word reinitiation, right, is because your body already moved you through all of the initiations into womanhood. Physically, your body is expressing to the world, this is the stage of development that I'm in. But your psyche, right, has not caught up yet because it was the initiation that you went through was not properly witnessed, acknowledged, tended to, or cared for, right? So this is the reason, right, that women often struggle and get locked in like the healing because they're trying to just like do it individually when really they actually need a community of people to witness them and say, you were not prepared for that initiation. You went through the initiation physically, psychologically, you didn't land here in your body in this moment in time because no one oriented you for what kind of woman you were meant to become on the other side. And so it makes sense that you're still like looping in the same wound over and over and over and over again, right? It is an expression of an unwitnessed, unrecognized, untended to initiation. So this is where my whole thing around reinitiations comes in. This has been my life path for the entirety of my 20s. How do I reinitiate myself? And what does that look like on the other side? So let's talk first about what are the 4 realms of initiation. So first and foremost, all of these initiations have to occur in 4 different dimensions, I guess we could say. The first is going to be in the body, the female body, okay? The second is going to be in the soul, the feminine soul. The third is going to be in relationship with the land here on earth, where we are, the territory, right? That you are in relationship with the land, the water, the fire, the air, the elemental guardian spirits, your oldest ancestors. And then the last realm of initiation has to occur within the village. It's not just something that you go through alone. You can't just come in and out of an initiation and be like, I'm initiated, boo-boo. It doesn't work that way. You need other people to recognize the change and transformation that you've been through, and to honor it as such, to say you are different. You have taken on a new community role. You have taken on a new responsibility. You have taken on a new expression of womanhood. We see you, right? We see you. That is what we really, really need, what we're also really missing. So what does reinitiating look like? There's 4 different stages that we got to do. The first is all about what's happening in our body, right? Our reproductive education. So understanding what is actually happening in your female body, your biology, your physiology, your anatomy, your hormones, and your physical experience of womanhood. When women are not like landed in their body and fully embodied in the reality of what it means to be a female mammal in this world, right? It is super confusing. The initiation won't land even though it has already occurred. The next realm of reinitiatory work that we tend to is going to be in the realm of the soul, and it's all about spiritual reorientation, right? And so this is teaching us how to cultivate the feminine medicine that is uniquely yours, that does not belong to anyone outside of you, that is just specifically yours, right? And so this is all around the works of our energetics, of our embodiment, of knowing that you don't have to prove yourself that you are feminine enough, right? That just by tending to your gifts, your medicine and your magic truly changes the world, right? So that's the realm of the soul that we need to tend to in a reinitiation. The next realm of reinitiation has to take place with the land, and that looks like ecological reconnection. So we're redeveloping a sense of belonging with the elemental guardians that that care for us, that orient us, that offer us all of their wisdom. So the air, the water, the earth, the fire. What we're doing here is that you're learning to work with the ancestral spirits of the territory and building a relationship of reciprocity and understanding the land that you are responsible for stewarding and tending to. Even if you live in a city and you're like, there's no land anywhere, you're on land. You're literally on land. You can't go anywhere where you're not in relationship with the earth, where you're not in relationship with the air. Even in New York City, where I lived for 8.5 years, right? You will always find your way to some ancestral guide that is asking you for reconnection. And then the last part of a reinitiation is going to be community reintegration, right? This is the part that we miss so often. This is the part that keeps us spiraling and looping in the wound, right? Instead of tending to the initiation, which is we receive proper witnessing and reflection about the community role that we're embodying and the path of service that we are meant to be taking, right? So, to be super clear, women cannot reinitiate alone, and we can't reinitiate just ourselves. We have to do it in community because the female nervous system itself is based upon connection and collaboration. We need other women who are doing this work alongside us, okay? We can't keep the momentum up in our work when we feel lonely and isolated because it does not work for the female nervous system to try to do any of this alone. So this is where most women's healing spaces are falling flat, right? Because they're not addressing all four sides of reinitiatory portals and rites of passage, right? You'll see a lot of women's spaces that don't actually address the physical reality of the body, or you'll see women's spaces that stay purely physical and don't address the mystical, or you'll see spaces that are disconnected from land acknowledgement and stewardship, or you see spaces that are stuck in the mentality that like women have to do this work alone, right? In isolation, which is in right, it's entirely a masculine way of going about things, being hyper individual. So this is why, one second. This is why, let me pull up my notes. Where did they go? Cool. Okay. This is why women are feeling super stuck in the inner child healing world, right? And like all of the shadow work stuff. It's why we feel like we're little girls walking around in adult women bodies, right? It's why you feel super scared to become an elder or a future matriarch of your community because you're trying to graduate a little girl into adulthood while skipping the chapter of 13 to 25. Your psyche is like stuck in limbo. Okay, and so what reinitiatory work really is going to be tending to like inner teenager healing, 13 to 25, when you would have received the majority of this wisdom and information if you lived in an intact culture, right? And so when we are tending to all four realms of initiation, we're reorienting the psyche, right? In order to say, this is the stage of womanhood that I'm in. This is the kind of initiation that I have moved through. This is the medicine that I walk with. This is how I embody the biological and the spiritual map of initiated womanhood, right? Which gets us out of that fucked up, annoying hamster wheel of healing and brings us into the woman that you wish you had to look up to when you first entered into your initiation into womanhood, right? So this is all of the work that we do inside the Red Tent, which is a 7-week rite of passage into initiations of womanhood, right? This is the body of work that I offer now to women. And I know that this process works because it's like literally exactly what I did to get myself to the place that I am today. Okay. So when I think about myself in my early 20s, when I was still in my obsessive healing phase, right? I was estranged from my family for almost a decade. I was suffering from horrendously painful periods, back-to-back UTIs and yeast infections. I had pelvic inflammatory disease that almost cost me my fertility. I was acting out hypersexuality and ongoing patterns of like self re-victimization with all of the men in my life. I was struggling with a 15-year-long eating disorder. I was grappling with substance abuse and chemical dependencies. I had terrible female friendships, absolutely toxic. They made me feel like complete shit about myself. And most importantly, I had like zero clue what my path of service was supposed to be. Now, after bringing myself through this process of deep reinitiation, I'm 30 years old. I have an amazing relationship with my parents and my little sisters. I'm going to see them on vacation next week, and I'm literally so excited. I could have never said that even like a couple years ago. I genuinely love getting my period, and I feel really at home in my body. I feel strong. I feel sexy. I feel powerful. I feel sensual. I feel sacred. I never could have said that even a couple years ago. I feel really safe around men, and I have like really clear discernment about the men that I choose to share my energy with. I feel really online with my inner masculine protector. I have an amazing circle of girlfriends who support me and uplift me and laugh with me and celebrate with me and who do this work alongside me to co-weave this matriarchal future that we know is our birthright. And most importantly, my path of service is like crystal clear, right? I literally get to teach women all day, every day, how to fall in love with the medicine of womanhood. Okay. I do it in prenatal appointments. I do it in births. I do it in postpartum visits. I do it in all of my classes, all of my one-on-ones. When I'm just in person with women, I literally alchemized every single ounce of suffering and pain that I went through before my Saturn return, and I turned it into my most potent medicine. And so I know it works because it worked for me. And I know that this works because I've seen it impact so many women's lives, right? Including the first cohort of the Red Tent that I taught back in February. So that first cohort of the Red Tent was fucking awesome. Okay. There were women from all over the world, all ages, all backgrounds. We had women from the US, from Mexico, the UK, Finland, South Africa, Turkey. A quarter of those women were already grandmother matriarchs, which I was obsessed with. Those grandmothers were amazing. We had 3 women who were in their very early postpartum with like brand new babies who were like on screen with us. A lot of them were still maidens like myself who are like patiently preparing and praying for a future motherhood journey. And after they moved through this reinitiatory portal with me, they told me that they finally stopped hating their body. Okay? Women who were like, I don't fucking hate my body anymore. What? How does that happen? They told me that they fell in love with their period, with their menstrual cycle. They told me that they felt fiercely devoted to the protection of their daughters' and granddaughters' wombs. They completely transformed their relationships with their partners. They felt confident and empowered in their mothering. They cleared lifetimes of violence from their pelvic floors. They became ferociously committed to centering their fertility and their health and their well-being. They felt ready to take on their community role and their responsibilities as the future matrix of their bloodlines, right? And most importantly, they remembered how fucking sacred it is to be a woman. That's why I share this work. That's why I share this transmission that I received from my elders and my ancestors and my own decades of suffering and alchemization, because I am fiercely devoted to co-creating a world alongside all of you where women can actually thrive. Okay, I want you to get rid of the knot in your stomach that comes up every time that you think about your body. And I want you to feel juicy and joyful in your flesh. I want you to ditch all of the fucked up, damaging patterns that made your whole motherline completely miserable. And I want you to birth the life of your wildest dreams. I want you to stop playing small with your powerful and potent medicine and go all the way the fuck in with your unique gifts that this whole world is begging for you to share. Because when women like you and women like me are fully online and present and embodied in our feminine magic, there is no way that this fucked up, life denigrating death over culture can survive. It's not possible, right? When we are this online, and we burn this shit down when we remember who we are and what we came here to do, right? We co-weave a world where our daughters and our granddaughters don't have to look around and say, well, where are all of my elders, right? Because we are the ones who are currently rebirthing a culture of intact womanhood that they get to inherit from us. And we cannot do that work if we remain uninitiated, right? So we got to get to work. And that is what we do in the Red Tent. So the Red Tent is a rite of passage into initiated adult womanhood that you never received and that your soul has been aching for. It's for the woman who is ready to finally feel at home in her female body and her feminine spirit without spending another decade trying to heal herself, right? We've all done that shit. We're over it. We're like, am I healed yet? Yes, you're healed. We are healed. We got shit to do, okay? So, through body literacy, spiritual initiation, earth based ceremony, and community celebration, this intimate 7 week rite of passage offers you a super extensive classroom library where you learn all about how your female body actually works. 7 live group classes that midwife you through each biological and spiritual stage of womanhood. 5 self-initiation rituals that bring your unique medicine fully online. We have 3 mentorship calls throughout, which will be a space solely focused on grieving, processing, celebrating, and co-visioning with other badass future matriarchs. There's a private podcast feed, and so you can take all of the work and the transmissions of the Red Tent wherever you go. So you get to listen and re-listen to all the classes and the mentorship calls when you're cooking, when you're driving, when you're working out, walking, when you're winding down after putting your kids to bed. And most importantly, you get an amazing, compassionate community of maidens and mothers and elder matriarchs who are ready to burn down this old world and co-birth the new one together. So the 7 live classes that I'm going to be teaching, they're going to be on Tuesdays at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. The 3 mentorship calls are going to be on Fridays, also at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. All of the classes will be recorded and uploaded to our classroom portal. You get video and audio access. That way you can just catch up on your own time. You will have 4 full months to absorb all of the content, so all the way until the end of 2026. You have 2 months of the live time together and then 2 months for rewatching and integrating all of the classes and the transmissions. So everyone always asks me, do you have to attend live? No, you do not have to attend live. This offering, this reinitiation, this rite of passage is meant to accompany you and fold into your full and busy and vibrant life, right? So the Red Tent costs $447 or 2 payments of $223.50. There's a $50 early bird discount, so that's available if you join before midnight on August 27th, midnight Mountain Standard Time. So that's this Thursday. I will put the discount code in the chat. So that means that it would be a one-time payment of $397 or 2 payments of $198.50. I am offering 1 full scholarship and 2 partial scholarships. Those are specifically available for single mothers, for newly postpartum mothers with babies under a year old, and then women who have experienced a miscarriage or an abortion in the past year. So if you would like a scholarship, please email me directly. And they're just offered on a first come, first serve basis honor system. So doors are officially open to the Red Tent. They're going to be closing on September 1st. That is our opening ceremony. And I also want to share that this is going to be the last time that I'm actually offering the Red Tent in this 7-week iteration. It wants to grow. It wants to be a lot bigger. It wants to really, really expand. And so all of the future iterations are actually going to be a lot longer, deeper, and offered at a higher price point. So if you're feeling that like, okay, the momentum is here, I want to do this now, this is going to be the last time that this kind of more 7-week accessible version is going to be offered. So I want to just close by acknowledging that initiatory portals are really fucking scary, okay? I know we're talking a lot about rites of passage and initiation, and like I want to name that they're really, really scary. And I also want to remind you that you know that it's the moment when your body says, fuck it, I am all in. I don't know what's on the other side of this and who I'm going to be, but I hear the call and I'm ready to answer, right? It's like in a birth when I watch women giving birth and there's just this moment where it's like, it is now or never, this is the time. That's what initiatory portals feel like. And you never actually feel ready for them when they call, but when they call, you answer, right? Or you don't. And it often will cause, how to say, it confuses the psyche sometimes when you're actually all in, but the human part of you is like, no, I'm scared, right? Like, trust. And what I can say about that is like the greatest initiations of my life have been the times when I've just said, like, fuck it, I am all in, okay? The first time was when I packed my entire life into a storage unit in Brooklyn and I left everything that I knew and I went to South America and I literally didn't speak Spanish, okay? And then I met my elders and my whole fucking life transformed. I wouldn't be here teaching you guys at all if I hadn't said, fuck it, I'm in, I'm going to the jungle, okay? One of my other biggest initiations was when earlier this year I packed my entire life into my car. I drove across the country with literally no plan. I just said, I need to go become a midwife. I landed in New Mexico, and within less than a week, I had 5 midwives who were willing to teach me, right? And then the other huge initiation that I was absolutely not ready for was teaching the first version of the Red Tent. I had no fucking clue what I was going to teach, you guys. I just knew that this had to be shared with women. I knew that this could help women. And I did not feel ready. And I still don't even really feel ready to teach this round of it, but I'm fucking excited. I'm lit up. I feel the women who are in the field. I feel the women who are ready for this work. And so I'm trusting that it's my time to do it, right? It's not a right time, it's not a wrong time, it's my time. And so if you feel something in you that's saying, it's my time, trust that. Trust that and join us. It would be such a gift. If you are a maiden, if you are a mother, if you are a grandmother, if you are someone who gives a fuck about the future of womanhood, about the future of this planet, if you care about the protection of the sacredness of our bodies, of our spirits, of the medicine we walk with, I would love to have you in the red tent. Okay, you guys, I've talked so much. I'm gonna shut the fuck up. I can't believe I got through all of that in exactly 91 minutes. Okay, so I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna go through the chat. I'm gonna give people time to share. If you wanna come off mute, if you wanna ask questions, if you have reflections, anything, I'm here for it. Let's see. What are people putting in the chat? Oh, Paloma said your mom's name was also Maria Magdalena. That's so sweet. That's beautiful. Okay. Anybody have anything that they want to share, that they want to ask?
Hi Claire, thank you so much for this amazing class. I'm just continuously blown away by your transmission right now. Like everything you have been posting, sharing, whatever it is, it's just been resonating and filling in a lot of the gaps of my journey. Quick question. I know we're gonna get a little bit of a recording, but what for the four, I don't know if it's okay. You can also send it to me later, but the four stages of reinitiation, I didn't get a chance to write the reproductive re-education description that you had. You can send it to me or now would could work, whatever.
Yeah, let me pull up my notes. Oh, wait. I have notes on my phone and on my computer. I was so prepared, you guys. ¿Dónde está? Da, 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 da. Yeah, okay, so in terms of like reproductive re-education, right? Super simple. We're not taught shit about our bodies. We're not taught shit about the reproductive system. We're not taught anything about what's actually going on, right? And so reproductive education is essentially just a deep process of grappling with the fact of like, oh my God, I don't know anything about my body. Nobody taught me anything. And I have to figure this out because I want to be well in my body. And to be well in my body, I have to understand my body, right? And for the female body, for the male body too, right? Like everything is based around the health of our nervous or the health of our reproductive system because that is one of the bases of like the basic mammalian functions, right? It's going to be anything for survival. So food, sleep, reproduction, right? Can I email you a PDF? Yes, I can totally email a PDF to anybody who registered for the class, for sure. Did that answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, and I also had a side question. I mean all the wounds, I'm sure all of us kind of resonated with that, but what my journey with not having, quote, not having elders and like looking for the elder women around me, I maintained that. And what I found myself sometimes is playing a young elder role a lot. So, meaning maybe I was in friendship with women who are older elders, like either big sisters or mothers, grandmothers, but they also had the wounds, and I would see the imbalance and take on the role of elder, and I'm like kind of breaking out of that cycle of doing that too, like kind of skipping the stage and just surrendering to being quote elder, even though I don't have all the experiences to back that. Do you have anything to say regarding
I have so many thoughts. Yeah, totally. I mean, a couple weeks ago, one of the women who joined the Red Tent last cohort, who was like a postpartum mother, she's 40 years old, right? She said to me, she was like, when I describe you to people, I describe you as you're 30 years old, but you walk and talk like an elder. And I just laughed because I was like, that's a crazy thing to say. And there's a part of me that can time travel to my future 86-year-old elder self and feel really online with her and know that like I walk with that medicine already, right? From every lifetime that I lived. I believe everyone is capable of that. I don't think I'm special. And I try really hard to hold myself to the standard of like, with my words, with my actions, with the life that I am living, am I walking in a way that will get me closer to that elder, right? And so there's like that part of having that orientation of like every choice that I make is in service to the future elder that I pray that I get to become if I get to live a long, beautiful life. But then there's the other side of things that I've had to really work on, which is to say, like, and it's important for me to let myself be in spaces and places where I get to be the younger, right? Where I get to look at the women who are older than me, who have a decade more on this planet, or two or three or four, five, 6 decades more than me. And I can really say, like, I get to rest in being the younger here because I'll never know how to be an elder if I sit here saying, well, I already walk and talk like an elder, right? It's like, if I don't let myself look up and be in right orientation and in right hierarchy with the people who are older than me, it causes distortion in the field. It causes a lot of pain, right? It causes a lot of resentment, I would say, right? Because like my psyche is really like, but I'm not the elder. You need to be the elder. But I can't let them be the elder if I'm sitting here constantly criticizing them, if I'm judging them, if I'm saying, well, like, you should do this and you should do that. I don't know what they should be doing. They've lived 10 years or 20 or 50 years longer than me. They've survived longer than me. So I have something to learn from them. I don't know. It really has been like a process of like, getting more and more humble. And it started first like with my mother more than anyone, right? Like tending to my mother wound and saying like, no, my mother is not perfect, but yes, she is 30 full years older than me. And so I need to look up to her in one way or another, right? And when I do that, I feel at peace as the younger. I feel in my right place as the younger. Is that helpful?
that? Yes, very. Thank you so much.
Okay. Awesome. Anybody else have thoughts, questions, reflections? Anybody angry about any of this and like, what the fuck? Why didn't I learn this? Cool. Well, if people feel good to close, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. As I said, I dropped the link in the chat for the red tent. The early bird discount is going to be available through this Thursday, August 27th at midnight Mountain Time. Use that discount code early. After that, it will be $447, or you can split it into two payments. If you want to reach out to me for a scholarship, please just email me. I would love to see each and every single one of you in the red tent. Thank you guys so much for your time. Thank you for your devotion. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your passive service. Thank you for spending an hour and 40 minutes with me. I really, really appreciate it. And we will be in touch.